let's dive in because there's so much I want to talk about and I want to get everything covered and I don't want to miss anything. But what I'm most curious about, and honestly, like, the people I interact with on the channel are, interested. Very few people I find are like me that are real diehard on the Phil side of things without, and so that's why I'm excited to talk to you. But I wanted to ask you about, like, how far does this go back? When was the first time you heard Phil? What is the roots of your fandom?
Oh, sure. So the first time I can remember acknowledging a love for Phil's voice was, I saw them in 1986 for the first time in October at the LA Forum.
Okay,
I was
wow.
17. Yeah, I saw the Invisible Touch tour with my friend Scott, a different Scott though, not this Scott.
Okay, yeah, I wish.
And the song, I think, "Throwing It All Away" probably was the line where he sings, "Who will light up darkness? Who will hold your hand?"
Yeah.
And then that zinger of, "Someday you'll be sorry, someday when you're free." I thought, God, that's a great lyric, and what a beautiful voice. And that's just, for whatever reason, I just remember that moment in time is when I fell in love with Phil's voice, and I think I liked probably Genesis more initially, and then over the years as I got older, I think I really kind of fell in love with Phil's lyrics, and then what he represented in terms of his humanity and how he shared so much of himself through his music. And I think then, I still, of course, love Genesis. And I'm also a big Peter Gabriel fan. I was actually probably a Peter Gabriel fan before I was a Genesis or Phil Collins fan.
No way. That's awesome. You're skipping ahead. You're skipping ahead to my questions for later on. No, that's okay. You've answered it. Okay, let's go back in time because this is very interesting. So Scott takes you to the show. Are you a Genesis fan going to the show, or are you just going to see like this hot band who's very popular right now?
Right. Like I think one of the documentaries, I think somebody says that, Tony or Mike or somebody. I think a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think a little bit of both, but maybe more what you said. They were huge, and I think I was one of those. 17.
Yeah.
So I wasn't a massive Genesis fan, but I was a fan. So
yeah. It's so funny because we always divide that era's fans into the 30-something men who were there to hear the prog stuff, and then the girls who were there to hear the pop stuff. I've never met, my channel is made up of the old dudes, and I've never met one of those girls who were dragged to the show to hear Invisible Touch and Throwing It All Away. What did you think about when hearing the Domino suite for 15 minutes or In the Cage medley, I think, was done? What was that like? Because I mean, Throwing It All Away is a great moment in that set, but like there's other songs that I feel like would have been, what would that have been like as a 17-year-old to hear some of those darker, older songs?
Yeah, so I don't have any specific memories of it in that way. And Throwing It All Away, I actually mean hearing it on the radio and loving Phil's voice. So, but of course, live, it was always great on that tour. But I think I remember, for example, In the Cage, I had the Lamb record. And so I probably was thinking about, wow, this sounds sort of the same, right? Because, many people, we've heard this a lot, that obviously Phil's voice and Peter's voice aren't the same. Yeah. They're very different. But because Phil often twin vocals, and he was the only other voice you ever heard with Genesis after, a certain point, it sort of sounded the same. So I kind of remember having in the back of my mind, like, how's this going to be if they do any songs that were, that were Peter songs? And so I kind of remember that, but I don't have, I think I was really into music. And so I wasn't one of those pop girls. And I actually think Scott came with me. I was a big concert
That's
girl.
Awesome. So you weren't going to the bathroom or anything, or going on social media when In the Cage comes on?
Yeah. Can you imagine if we had cell phones back then, how happy we'd all be, because we'd have all this content, right? But no, I am someone to this day who gets irritated when when you see people drinking mad amounts of alcohol. Like, why would you pay to go to a show and then, be drunk? It's just stupid.
I completely agree. So then when did things, after that album, you have But Seriously, did you feel, I mean, We Can't Dance is a very accessible and fun record as well. So I imagine that you enjoyed that, but like, was there a time where you felt like I'm starting to go this way towards Phil, or was that just natural as the band ended after We Can't Dance?
Yeah, so I probably was one of those fans who was a little bit critical of We Can't Dance a little bit.
Okay.
Even Invisible Touch, that was my first show, but I was probably one of those people who was slightly wary, right?
Right.
What is all this hyper pop and all of the big, I'm not a big stadium tour person. I think it's really, it's brutal for the fans. Sure. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. I was a big U2 fan also. Okay. And so in 87, I went to a bunch of shows on the Joshua Tree tour. Wow. So my focus wasn't I wasn't a hyper Genesis fan. So I had been a mad, as we're going to get to later, a mad Peter Gabriel fan. And I have some really fun stories. But anyway, so I would say, I started just gravitating toward Phil probably more after the last U2 album that I really liked, which was what's the album, Scott, that has Mysterious Ways? Is that Octoon Baby?
Yeah, that well, actually, I feel like that was a greatest hits song. Is that the?
I don't know. I don't remember, but I just remember that was really over.
Okay. So early 90s.
Yeah, and then I think that with the Sirius tour, which I did not actually see the Sirius tour, which is so sad.
Oh,
but
wow.
I think that's kind of when my Phil Collins era, and I think that's probably the Phil Collins. A lot of people that are older than me probably had 85 for them was the Phil year, but for me it was those early 90s.
Right.
And yeah.
So you would have been in your 20s around that time. It's interesting because like a lot of people, the music of, well, I would say, from 16, 17, all the way into my early to mid 20s is the most, meaningful albums of my time. It's because that's when you're coming of age, you're reaching independence, separating from your family, you're getting freedom, being in relationships. So you just are experiencing life in this very hyper way, and all of the whatever soundtracks you were listening to at the time, have become soundtracks. And so that's interesting that you were experiencing some of those records in your early 20s. And so were you tracking with Phil? Were you happy with Both Sides and Dance into the Light and eventually Testify? Tarzan, I mean, I'm asking because I know you're a diehard fan as well. For me, I was a couple years behind you, and so I would have been going through my rebellious teenage years during those albums. So it wasn't cool for me to bring Dance into the Light cassette into grade 10 in the high school. I'm just curious, how were you feeling that his career was tracking as he was getting older, as he had left the band?
Yeah. So I would say that I wasn't really a really hardcore Phil fan in the 94, 95, 96. Dance into the Light, I really liked. And it wasn't that I didn't like Both Sides. It's just I was doing stuff. I was graduating from college and doing other things. And so I think probably the 2004 tour brought me back to being more present. But I always enjoyed the music and, had the records or CDs or whatever. Testify for me, I wasn't engaged with that really. And it's a shame because there's a lot of great music on Testify. But I think much like the world, I think I ebbed and flowed, but never was critical of Phil's music or his path or his choices. And when he was being beaten up, here in the US, I wasn't aware of it as much. I was aware that some people were sort of, thought his music was douchey or something, that it wasn't cool or hip. But I never fell prey to that. But yeah, no, I think it wasn't until 2004 tour that I kind of re-engaged with being really present with being an active fan.
I would have to agree. I would have to be, I had my eras and you had your eras, but I came back at 2004 as well. And I think that was probably one of the best set lists as well, because it covered it covered Tarzan, Brother Bear, the True Colors. I mean, it was maybe a little ballad heavy, a little sappy heavy, but it really covered everything. You realize, oh yeah, I love that song. I love that song. I love that one too.
Yeah. And I think that's it. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's so many hits and so many eras. And it just brings you back. Like at that point, how old? I was born in 69. So that made me, how old? In 2004, was I 30 something?
35 maybe. Yeah.
So you start to look back and you remember moments.
That's right.
Oh man. I remember, my high school prom, our theme was, In the Air Tonight, of course.
Wow. Yeah.
But you start to remember moments. And I think that's the key to Phil Collins for many fans. And when I interviewed Harry Kim, trumpet player, Vine Street Horns, Phoenix Horns, he was talking at the end of my interview with him about why he felt people resonated with Phil. And he said, because, technical performance or people who are highly regarded by critics for pushing the envelope, things like that, that's not Phil. But what Phil does is he touches the hearts of people. And that is something you cannot manufacture. And it's something that he just has in spades, right? And and I feel that's for me what happened to make me engage more is the emotional connection to his music, and whatever it is that he has, boy, he sure has it,
It's true. You can't put your finger on it. Okay, let me put you on the spot here. Favorite song, favorite album, favorite tour?
Oh, for sure. My favorite album is Hello, I Must Be Going.
Interesting.
Phil's second solo effort. It's my favorite. Every song on there. I mean, I Cannot Believe It's True is such a great song. It's the theme of my podcast, actually, but because it also has a message. I cannot believe it's true that Phil's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist. And my favorite song, it's so difficult to pick. There's so many beautiful songs, but I really like I Don't Care Anymore. And I like it for so many reasons, but I like it because it's just really raw and honest, and and the repetitive drum open, the intensity of the song. I just love it.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. That's cool. And I guess your favorite tour would. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about. Perhaps it was that 2004 kind of rekindling.
Gosh. For shows that I attended, I think as a fan watching back, you cannot beat the Perkins Palace show as far as an insanely awesome, just incredible live, just tour de force. The guy was just on fire.
Yeah, very loose. I
love it. It's so great. But the 85 show in Dallas when they filmed that. Yeah. Insane. I mean, Phil was just in his prime, just absolutely brilliant.
And it was before he was polished too. That's what I like about the Hello, I Must Be Going tour. He's not a star yet. He's not a celebrity yet.
Yeah, exactly. And there's beauty in that. The Invisible Touch tour was great, but that's not Phil, that's Genesis. But that was a great shit. And the 2007 tour, again, for Genesis, brilliant.
There's so many.
2004 tour for Phil, I think really was a beautiful show. He really showcased for his fans. And if you ever see the documentary, The Long Good Night, I think it's called, where it chronicles his experience on that tour and how much he sacrificed and how much he gave, and how hard it was, and all the different places they went where people don't normally tour, and it's very good. I think overall that tour was beautiful for so many reasons. Yeah,
absolutely. The latest tour of Genesis, and in a way, the Not Yet Dead tour, but Phil had kind of progressed to be even in rougher shape. There's a lot of like online criticism that maybe Genesis shouldn't have even done that, should have left the legacy intact, that it was almost cruel to Phil. And a lot of people didn't like, I spoke to a friend who's a big Genesis fan, and he didn't want to go to the show because he didn't want that as his last picture of the band. I just personally can't understand that. I mean, it's like not going to see Grandpa at Christmas because you want to maintain some image of yours. It's like, sorry, Grandpa, I'm not going to see you anymore. I just don't understand it. This is life. This is the progression. Phil had a personal connection with touring with Nick. I'm not going to compare it to 2007. I'm not going to compare it to 1986. It was just today in that moment. What were your thoughts on Phil's condition and that tour, specifically the Last Domino?
Well, sure. So I actually saw 11 shows on that tour.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I have told my story many times, so I won't take our time retelling my personal story, but I will just briefly say that I lost my husband to colon cancer in April of 21. And he was a massive Phil fan. And I don't know, I was sitting around in the end of July, right before my birthday, which is on August 1st. And I had this strange compulsion to listen to Phil's music. And I was trying to remember the last time my husband and I saw Phil. It was on the Not Dead Yet tour. And it was in the city I live in Phoenix. And so I started to Google it, and I didn't even know Genesis was touring. That's kind of how out of the loop I was, because my husband was ill and
sure.
And I kind of wasn't up on pop culture and things. So I had this weird compulsion, and I went to 11 shows on the tour.
So you booked 11 shows. Did you book them all at once, or?
No. So it kind of just evolved. I started out with my first ticket I bought was for Charlotte or Raleigh. I can't be sure, because my parents lived in Florida. And I was going to be going to see them right before the shows. And so I thought, oh, that's a great city to stop in and start. Well, then I decided to go to England. So my first shows were in Leeds and Newcastle. And I chose those cities because they're relatively smaller cities. And so I was in Leeds, and it was early tour. I think it was show 5 on the tour. And as I watched the shows. And ultimately, I attended the last 3 shows in London. I watched Phil's voice get better, and his connection with the audience is what made it special, I think, for everybody there. Yeah, his voice wasn't what it was in 1985, right? When he was at the height of his beautiful vocal abilities. But it was still Phil, and he was still, doing the tambourine dance, but seated. He was still funny, and he was still doing. There were some times when he would do shtick with Nick. They did for people who didn't see the shows. They did a little thing where they kind of pulled up close and did sort of a semi-acoustic set, and he would do shtick with Nick. And just funny stuff. He was just funny, he
was.
Yeah, and I was in the front row almost every show. I just spent money and had good luck, and so I think he got used to seeing me and would mess with me. And I have some stuff on video.
Wow!
It was beautiful and wonderful, and I think I respect people's needs to not see him. I think it was not a rational thought some people were having. I feel like, it's a hard question. It's a difficult subject because, it's hard to see somebody struggling. And I think a lot of people thought he was in pain, and he may have been, I don't know.
Sure.
But I loved those moments and being a part of history.
Well, and he was there, and he chose to be there. I assume.
I doubt Tony Smith forced him, but you never know.
You never know. Yeah, I think maybe he lost a bet. I think, yeah, I mean, it's just like you say, he was funny, and if you watch some of the jokes and some of the way he spoke to the audience, then comparing it to 40 years earlier, you can tell it's the same guy. And he was political. He was, I thought I just thought it was fantastic. And the other two guys too played the same role that they've played for 50 years, just standing there, smiling, being dead quiet.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. One of my favorite all-time things is on the Three Sides Live video during, during Misunderstanding, and he points at Tony. He was just leaving. And Tony's just so deadpan, And anyway, Tony was that way. Phil was, even on the not Last Domino tour, he would mess with Tony, and Tony was just deadpan. He was just.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So tell me about how many degrees from Phil this fandom goes. You've talked about your origins with Peter. There's kind of like, sometimes if you're a fan of Genesis, there's an obligation to check out Steve Hackett and Anthony Phillips and Mike and the Mechanics and Tony's work. And there's a lot there that I've enjoyed. There's records there that I've just obligated to round out my collection that I don't listen to very often. So can you tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, your initial connection with Peter Gabriel, but then what's your thoughts on stuff like the Mechanics or Brand X?
Brand X. Yeah. So my first record that I had of Peter Gabriel's, and I don't remember, I think it was probably my Aunt Karen. She was my mom's younger sister, and we were like buddies. And she loved The Lamb. And I actually have still her copy of The Lamb that has her name written on it. People back in the day.
They did that. I have some of those too.
Records, yeah. I still have hers, which is really cool. What was Peter Gabriel Plays Live, and that remains my favorite Peter Gabriel record. Those who aren't familiar with it, it was recorded on the 82 tour for Peter Gabriel.
Perhaps after his second album or third album.
You think second? I think. It has like Sandy and Sidto and Lay Your Hands on Me and DIY and and a great version, of course, of Biko and my favorite Peter Gabriel song is the song that probably most people will not know of, and they'll think it's weird, but it's called Family Snapshot.
Oh yeah, I love that tune.
It's a beautiful song. Yeah, beautiful. It's so the studio version is great, but the live version on that record, it takes you on a journey with not only the lyrics but the music, and it starts out, and it's about an assassin, and also the fact that he probably was, neglected as a child, and it's such an amazing story. And so I was not, I'm not an assassin, and I wasn't abused as a child or neglected, but it's just the brilliance of Peter Gabriel and how he uses music and lyrics to tell his story, which I think is, and of course now visuals, of course, in his live shows. But anyway, that record made me a mad fan of his for some reason. And I actually got to see him a couple times before he went big with the So record. So I got to experience him still doing the stage dive, I got to hold him over my head. Cool. I saw him in Europe in '87. I graduated high school and went and saw him in Copenhagen and Berlin. So that was really
cool teenager back then.
Yeah, I was really lucky. My dad who passed away when I was 18. He was a radio DJ when I was young. Wow. And a radio and club DJ. And so my parents really liked music, and so I kind of grew up, with parents that allowed me to go to shows and do stuff. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my Peter Gabriel thing, and I just liked him. During the So record was great, but again, it's one of those things where you roll your eyes because you think you're like too cool for school when you liked him before. So, right. No, I'm teasing, but I've seen all the tours since my first shows, and
that's great. I didn't know that about you. You're a closeted Peter Gabriel fan.
Yeah, I do like him.
I did a video recently about my history with Peter, and it was really just buying the Shaking the Tree greatest hits record because I knew he was somehow connected to Phil. When I was a teenager, I was like, I know these guys have a history, and I fell in love with that greatest hits album, as was pretty common back in the '90s to like buy a greatest hits album and as an introductory to an artist, and since then, he's always been third place, fourth place in my favorite artists, but that's really cool. I didn't know that about you. What about some of the other people in the orbit of Genesis and Phil?
Yeah. So, of course, I have Anthony Phillips, the Goose record. I can't think of the name of it.
The one where Phil sings on.
Yeah, of course. Because I have that. And I have Voyage of the Acolytes, of course, from Steve. And I have a couple of Mike solo records and some Mechanics records. I don't dislike the Mechanics. It just wasn't. I never dug my heels in or sunk my teeth in or whatever the phrase is with any of the other groups. Brand X, I really like a lot. So I have I have all the records that Phil appears on. Sure. But again, I didn't get into the other guys as far as, digging into their histories and things like that. I really have a lot of Flaming Youth memorabilia because it's that era right before, Phil joined Genesis. And I'm not saying I love the music as much as I love Phil's solo work, but I think Flaming Youth was fun. And so I have kind of I have a neat collection of.
That's interesting.
I have this one thing that it's band signed. I got it at auction and it's signed. He signed Philip Collins, and he actually wrote Flaming Youth. You can see it's his writing. Yeah. And the other guys, Ronnie and the other guys signed, and it's really neat. Flaming Youth is cool. But I have a big collection of stuff. If Phil's on it, I have it.
Well, let's talk about that. That's what I want to get into is the collection. When and why did it start? Yeah. When did it go from being I have a few things, I'm a fan, to this is now an official collection?
Yeah, so my collecting probably started in 2004. I always like to get set lists when I can. Yes. And I got a set list from the show in Phoenix, from the center mic stand. So there's a footprint on it that I'm convinced is Phil's, right?
I bet.
And so I got the set list, and I also got some paper that was like the crew schedule, which is really cool. I can send you the picture and you can maybe incorporate it in if you want. And then I got a drumstick, but it's not Phil's. It's too long to be his. So maybe it's Chester's, I assume, but so that was kind of my first Phil thing that I got. And then I didn't really start. The big stuff that I have came after my husband passed. It was, I think I was running from the grief and doing things to occupy the hole I felt, to fill that hole, the void in my life. So some of the big stuff where I have no reply at all, handwritten lyrics, which is insane. So cool. I have his tuxedo that he wore to the 1986 Grammy Awards in this museum quality cabinet. It's crazy. It's just some of the things I have are so incredible that I forget. You
have Converse, right? Some shoes.
What's that? Some
Converse shoes.
Oh God, no. My friend Leonidas has those, and that's a weird story too. I can't even remember when I became aware of wanting those shoes, right? Yeah. Forever. And then my husband passed and I started getting involved in the fan community a little bit. And then started collecting a little more once you see what people have. And I don't know how, but I came across a post or something of Leonidas or something. And I wrote him a letter. I found out, I looked him up, or I don't even remember what it was, but I wrote him this personal note. And I said, I have to have a pair of those shoes because it seemed like he had at least a few pairs. And to this day, you know, he and I are friends now, and he's lovely. And for people who are listening to me who don't know, he's probably the world's largest collector of Phil Collins items, like memorabilia. Wow. He's incredible. Wow. And his vision is to preserve and save these things because of their historic value. And he just is amazing. But to this day, he hasn't parted with any of those shoes. So Leonidas, I'm waiting.
What size are they?
Yeah, his Phil's are size 7. His Converse are size 7. So they probably wouldn't fit me. Well, in men's, maybe they would. But I do have some custom Chucks that I had made for the Genesis tour. I had pink ones done, and on the back of each heel in vertical it says "Love" and then Phil. And so awesome. I would wear this at the shows, and sometimes people would see, "Hey, are you Traci?" Because I was on the fan groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is so cool. Is there, one of the things I've talked to our mutual friend Adam from the Genesis Museum about collecting is this idea of like some collectors have a type of thing that they collect, or they have parameters in their collections. For me, I've naturally, I don't know how it happened, but I've gravitated towards the music side, the media, cassettes, CDs, and especially vinyl. And that's just kind of where I'm interested in. I'll spend crazy money on that side of things. But there's other things that don't interest me as much. So do you have parameters in your collection, or is there any sort of invisible guidelines in your mind to say, yes, I've got to have that, or that's not interesting to me?
Yeah. So I like stuff that Phil touched.
Okay. That's
and
cool.
I don't mean, well, I guess I do mean physically touched, but that, like lyrics, for example, that's his work product. So it's not just an autograph, right? An autograph of Phil's is great because it's something that's his, but something that he created or used to create. So the very famous story that most people who might even have any knowledge of my existence on the planet because of the campaign that I do is my tambourine that I have. He gave it to me from the stage at the very last Genesis show ever. And so that tambourine he made music with on that whole tour. And I was very lucky to see Brad Marsh, who I didn't know at the time, who I'm now, he's actually a dear friend. And he told me that Phil played that tambourine on the whole tour. And normally that would be unheard of because Phil used to beat the crap out of tambourines. We've all seen the ones he's punched through. And so, things that
that's huge.
Have a significance in the history part of music. So the tuxedo, he won all these Grammys wearing that. Lyrics where he recorded, No Reply. Oh my God. Right. So things like that have or gold records, things that were presented to him for the creative aspect. And there are people, there's a guy who collects posters, and he's always asking me, do you have, this poster and that poster? And some of them I have are autographed, and he doesn't care about the autograph. It's not interesting to him. Right. And so for me, I'm like, well, why would you want to have a poster as an autograph? So like you said, there's a diversity of interests for sure. But I think so cool. My collection tends to be more that or rare things, unique things, that sort of thing.
And I mean that's the archival. I mean it's like a true museum in the sense that like you have this the things that interest me, and again it's mostly music related, the media, but when you talk about this tambourine, this having this connection, like it is a conduit to his hands, to his music. It's a symbol. It's like, obviously you're not scraping it for DNA. Maybe you are, but it's really just more a symbol that you are connected to him in one way or another. And to be able to just look over and see that is, triggers a memory, triggers a feling. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. I had a fan ask me shortly after, did you smell the tambourine? Did it smell like him?
Yeah, I probably would. That's not a crazy question.
No, it was funny, but I'm like, I didn't, but I wish I had because, you know. Yeah, it's funny.
That's funny. Well, that is a really cool thing. That's not something I would turn down. There's got to be times where you do have to say, I can't get this. This doesn't make sense. Or I mean, worrying about the authenticity of certain things.
That is a problem. There's a lot, and there are some fans who will post things on. I have a page with lots of wonderful members that support the effort that I'm pushing through, hopefully this year, to get Phil voted in to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they'll post something and they'll say it's a prized possession, and I just don't have the heart to tell them that that's not an authentic signature. I have an example. I have an example of that here in the background. This picture that's behind here. I like the picture, but it's not an authentic autograph. It was somebody sent it to me. As a gift, a family member. And so I have it here, but in my opinion, it's not an authentic signature, but it's a good picture and, I have it. But
when you say a not authentic, do you mean that it was scanned and then printed on, or that it was somebody just forged it and didn't do a good job?
I don't know. But the person I ended up finding out where my family member bought it. And the person said, it really is Phil's signature. He just rushed it. So, the P looks like his P.
Okay.
It could be authentic. It's
that
just
doesn't
not
look real. But but what about when they catch the guys coming out of the back of David Letterman and all those autograph seekers? They are rushing. But that does not look. Then again, I don't know. But then again, if you were forging a signature, wouldn't you take your time and make it look like it does on the albums?
And it does have qualities of how he did his last two letters too.
Let's pivot into I want to hear about this. The Phil get voted in. This is the big thing we're talking about today. It's the thing that you're known for. I want to take me back to the origins of this. How did this become something that you're so passionate about? Why is this important?
Yeah. So when I came back from my 11 shows on the Genesis tour, it was March of 22. My husband had been gone for almost a year. And I think I was still kind of running and not wanting to stop for a moment to probably really process the grief, right? Or whatever I was doing. And I don't know how it came to be that I knew he wasn't. I think my friend Kathy Steffen, so I have made some really neat friends, great friends, some that really supported me in who had lost a spouse or whatever. Kathy, I met, she's been a fan for 40 years. And it was her relationship with Leland Sklar that allowed me to have my first podcast guest for the campaign. And once Leland said yes, then it was pretty easy for me to get some other, not easy, but other people were willing to say yes.
Great.
But anyway, I think Kathy's story got me thinking about the Rock Hall, and maybe it was even Kathy who told me that he wasn't in. I don't remember, but I thought it was so egregious. I couldn't believe Phil Collins was not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his solo work, because his solo work is so absolutely the body of work itself is incredible, right? I mean, so I just woke up one day and said, I'm going to start a Facebook page. But I also had in my mind the logo. And I said, I want to have a website and I want a YouTube channel. And I want, and I could see, people wearing a hat or whatever. Yeah. So you can see this, my logo. I made the logo. This is my personal one. People don't have this with the heart. Phil Collins, my signature is the heart. So this is my logo. Yeah. But
and it looks like his handwriting too, the logo.
I tried to find a font that most closely resembled his writing. I heard there's a font, I can't remember the name of it, that people say they created based on his, but this is not it. This is called Jelly. I think Jelly is the font type.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I just woke up one day and decided I was going to do it. And I had been kind of joking around with some fellow fans, and I just came up with the hashtag. But really, it was just, I couldn't believe that he wasn't in. And then I started to be kind of really feeling bad that Phil was so poorly treated, in the 90s. Yeah. And the critics were so nasty to him and all of that. So that kind of fueled my fire a little more. I became this, advocate of, this protector, right? I mean,
for people to revisit him, to view him in a new light.
Yeah. And so I started the campaign in April of 22, and it just kind of became a thing for me. He's been eligible for 18 years. That's when he became eligible, face value, based on what that came out. And he's just been overlooked. And I think the Rock Hall is changing right now. I don't know if you want me to share my opinions on this, or you want to ask other questions.
Well, I'm curious just about, and maybe this will be where you're headed, but I was curious, like, how do they view pop stars? Is that considered rock in the same way?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's, anytime anybody talks about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you will get 9 million opinions, and none of them are going to agree, right? And none of them are wrong, because it's really just about your opinion. Do I think Dolly Parton should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I don't know. I do, but because I think the definition of rock and roll, it cannot be taken literally.
That's
music,
a good point.
Music Hall of Fame, but then music, like, it's very nebulous. And Missy Elliott's one that people often complain about. Okay, it's not anywhere close to Phil Collins' music or Mariah Carey or whatever.
Sure.
But I think the focus from the Rock Hall is influence on music. Right. So has the artist influenced music, and in what way? And influence music meaning, have other generations of musicians taken from what they've done? Well, in Phil Collins' case, absolutely. I mean, we see that every day. We saw it in the Mike Tyson.
That's right.
What was it? I said Jake Paul. I think he's their fighter.
Logan Paul.
Whatever the other fighters. I feel so terrible.
Well, Traci, it's funny because this criteria has been met in, maybe we could name 15 different ways. There are drummers that look up to him for his work in Selling England by the Pound and in The Lamb. There's the drum sounds alone. People have been copying his sound, his use of drum machines, the pop songs that he's known for, the love songs, the 80s sound. It doesn't matter. You could pick whatever you want. Even Tarzan alone could get him in there. There's so many things that he could be known for. Pick which one you want.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's his influence on music, is to say it's significant is an understatement. 100%. And he's in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and of course he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Genesis, of course. But he's been recognized by so many bodies for his work, but again, I feel he's very underrated. There are people who don't even know he's a drummer. I mean, and he's widely considered by other musicians as one of the finest drummers. And I mean, his unique time signatures, and in one of my interviews, the person was telling me that he has perfect time. You hear people have perfect pitch. Well, Phil has perfect time. The story was that there was a metronome during, I think it was 2004 tour, and Ricky Lawson, he's passed on now, but Ricky wasn't getting something. I think it was Easy Lover maybe, and he wasn't getting whatever Phil wanted him to do, and so anyway, they turned off. I think he turned on the metronome and then turned it off. Whatever. The person observed Phil come playing, and then the metronome came on, and Phil's timing was on point.
Wow,
on point.
That doesn't surprise me.
He just has an inherent sense of time. Anyway.
Yeah, it's incredible. So then, is the movement like this? I mean, it's one thing to start a Facebook page, and for all of us, you're preaching to the choir on your Facebook page, right? All of us are in agreement with you. But is there anything that can actually be done? It's like whenever somebody sends me a petition to sign, I'm like, what is this going to do? Like, how is this going to make a difference? Is there something that can you actually be responsible for getting him considered?
Well, so I initially didn't know much about what was an effective route What I did know was that my background's in communications and PR. What I did know is that I wanted to engage in a big PR campaign, essentially. But I started with a petition, and I've since abandoned the petition. Petitions people hate. They hate them because they're distrustful of them. And any petition platform that you can find that's free, they're trying to sell you stuff at the end or collect money or whatever. So that really turned me off. So I think if we can move the needle on people talking about Phil again, and we can, I have tried reaching out to various people, Dave Grohl being one, and I know somebody who actually knows him. I was being interviewed for something for my job, not related to Phil, but my actual job, like my Phil Collins job, and then and as it turns out, he's a retired TV and movie guy, and his friend is some production person for Foo Fighters. So I recently got a message through to that guy. So I'm hoping that helps. I feel like if we can just continue to get people talking, at some point, somebody who's either on the nominating committee or knows somebody on there, and once he gets nominated, it's not a slam dunk. I mean, I would think it would be, but there's a voting body too. I think, I don't remember how many people it is, but thousands. And we have to influence the voting body also to choose Phil. So it's just a PR campaign, really. It's just the more people we can get talking about Phil, and the more people we can help understand how significantly he's contributed to music and the generations that he's influenced.
That's a good point.
How fantastic he is. Yeah.
I feel like we're getting close to that being a reality, because especially since Concord has the catalog, it seems to be they're pushing it more. We're hearing it more on TV shows, the ESPN Monday Night Football, and I feel like we're just starting to hear. Where did I hear? I heard One More Night in the back of that new George Clooney movie, George Clooney and Brad Pitt. I think that was the movie I heard. One More Night playing, and I just think like the songs are getting used more out there now that there's like a company who's pushing their use. So hopefully the time will come. So before I let you go, we are recording this in early November, mid-November. When does this nomination, it comes out, I imagine, annually. When does this nomination list come out, and how big is it?
Sure. So in the past, they have announced early February. So I expect that will be the case. And each year they tend to release maybe 12 to 15 names, and then they'll induct, 6 to 8. Depends. And I'm not speaking definitively, and this just go based on what I've seen. So I expect
February is when they announce the inductees or the nominees.
The nominees, and then I think I can't remember when they announced the actual inductees. I'll have to think about it, Scott.
But getting on the nominations would be a huge win. Is that right?
I would probably cry for a few days. It would be massive. I can't imagine that if Phil was finally nominated, that the voting body would not vote him.
That's right. He's a little too big, I think, especially if you're talking about like half of the nominees are making it in. Here's a morbid question then. When he does make it in, what happens to you? What happens to the website and the merch?
Right. So, well, and so it's funny when you say the merch. My hats that I had made, I only had made them to give to my interview subjects, because I felt like the video and podcast that I was doing with these incredible musicians, that I wanted to give them a little present.
Yeah, that's great.
Having a picture of Leland Sklar wearing
that helps.
It's pretty cool, right? So, but people kept asking me. I was like, no, it's not available. So finally I made a few things available. But so what happens, I think we remain a community. I think the particular page that I'm running, I'm a bit of a taskmasters when it comes to kindness and not having any nonsense. I don't allow commentary about his personal life. I don't allow negativity. I don't allow people to bully members. And I think people think I'm really uptight. I'm actually really fun, but I don't like nonsense and I don't like unkindness. But And so we formed this community of people that's really, really wonderful. And I'd like to stay involved for sure, but I sure would like a break from it. So, I mean, it's a lot of work,
Well, I'll be keeping we're always keeping our eye out every year, and hopefully, hopefully something, even just the idea of Leland, how connected he is. I just think it'll come soon. It will come soon.
I hope 2025 is his year, and I would like not to have it be a posthumous induction. I would like it to happen while Phil is alive.
I wonder too, the Concord thing, with his catalog being sold and them pushing that would be good for them to have him back in the news. When a song goes viral or gets used in a movie, sales of that record or that streams of that song go up and up and up. So it would be in their best interest if they're connected in any way to make sure that people are considering him.
Well, that's a great point, Scott. And I think you and I should talk later and let's contact them.
Yeah, that's right. That sounds great. Well, congrats on everything. Thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
No, thank you. It's fantastic. And I'm glad we finally got to do this. It's great.